Okay, I wanted to point out a problem I had with the BDS suspension lift kit that I put on this 71 CJ5. It's not a problem specifically with the BDS suspension system. It's an issue that I ran into, and here's my solution. I'll go through the cause and what I did to fix it. First of all, this is a 2.5-inch lift. It's a 71 CJ. It's pretty much stock, but as you'll find out, it's not completely stock. I don't know too many Jeeps after 40, 50 years that are stock. But at any rate, the problem I had was this ball joint right here for the drag link where it ties into the tie rod was hitting a bracket, and that bracket looked just like this. Prior to me cutting off the ends of it and tack welding some 1/8-inch flat strap over it. So that was my solution. So cranking it full left, I was about 1/4 inch from the turn angle stop bolts on the knuckles, and it would hit on the bracket. So I just cut it off. Now, the reason I say this is not a BDS problem is this is not a stock steering linkage setup. In other words, if you look at the bell crank, this is a 71, so it still has the Ross steering box. There's the bell crank, which is mounted off the frame, cross member. And then we've got a drag link going to the tie rod right there by the knuckle. And if you notice, I have a one-piece tie rod. Let's go underneath and look. So there's the left knuckle. I do have a steering stabilizer. And that tie rod goes all the way. So it's a one-piece tie rod. So the reason I say it's not a BDS problem is I've got an upgraded linkage on this CJ. Those of you that are familiar with CJ5s prior to 72, they have the Ross steering with the bell crank. And off of the the bell crank, you had a joint here, a ball joint here, where you would have a tie rod going to your right front, and then you would have a tie rod going to your left front. So this has got the single tie rod, and it's actually a better system. It's a desirable system to have a one-piece tie rod versus two, because if you think about it, having the drag link or tie rods tied to the frame and then going to the knuckle, you've got your suspension in between. So every time the leaf springs or your suspension flexes, your toe end would change. Just think about it. And that's why a lot of these old Jeeps have, wobble and steering issues. And it's partly because of that. And the other part is if you have worn ball joints and, kingpins and maybe even bell crank or drag link kind of links, you got all kinds you can have issues going down the road. So that's why this one-piece tie rod is a preferred solution versus the standard two-piece tie rod. So anyway, the problem was I had interference with a bracket, and I remedied it by just using a cutoff saw, a little 3-inch cutoff, and I just cut off the ears off that bracket and tack welded some 1/8-inch strap over the top. So this is the front end suspension. Ordered the kit from BDS. Everything fit perfect. Very highly recommend the kit. I got another video on the installation. I also put in had a guy from the Jeep Club or forum make some. Let's see if you can see it. There's a shim down there. It says 3 degrees on it. It's about 5/16 thick. One on the left and one on the right. So maybe these will show up. So anyway, my caster was 3 degrees prior to putting the lift on, okay? And the reason it was, and 3 degrees is the spec, and that's what you find in the manual, okay? And the reason is I still have stock shackles on here, so I haven't raised it. So that's why I have 3 degrees caster. Well, now I put those shims in and I bumped my caster up to 6 degrees. And you say, well, why would you do that when the spec's 3? Well, first of all, we've got, you know, radial tires. Tires are different way back in the 60s and early 70s. You know, they had bias ply. And I wanted it to track very well, or at least return to center and track really well going down the highway. So I know 6 degrees is very acceptable, even 7. So this thing on a test drive, we just drove perfect. So, you know, I don't see any problem going down the highway 60, 70 miles an hour with one finger on the steering wheel because it wants to go straight. Now the trade-off to having the 6 degree caster is your pinion angle. So you got to keep in mind you could get some vibration from the front drive shaft because of the pinion angle. So you wouldn't want to go over 7, and 6 is pretty common. A lot of people do that. So, and you got to think about it. When you're in 4-wheel drive or that front drive shaft, you know, if you're worried about vibrations, you're typically going slow speeds in 4-wheel drive. So it's not like you're going down the road 35, 40 miles an hour. And that's where, in the past, I've seen vibration problems if you didn't have the rear pinion and the transfer case output at the same plane or parallel. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. Not a problem with BDS. It's basically a modification, non-stock steering setup. So that's why I had the problem. Anyway, this thing is awesome. So the installation went well. Highly recommend it, and check the other video out on the install.